Hey guys, I thought we might go over your writing for the practice run number 3. You had the option of 3. Actually, you were assigned one of 3 long prompts, and I thought I would just start with the first one here on innovative techniques. Okay, so walking back through the things that we want to do here, I would probably need to zoom in first. Can you guys see that okay? Okay. Your image that you were given is Helen Frankenthaler's The Bay. Okay. And I've got it here in black and white on my page. I can't really see too much color. Just a reminder, if you're doing this and printing things off to annotate, you want to remember the original colors. So if you have a color printer, that would be awesome. But at least we can annotate from this. Okay. I'm going to back out a little bit so we can see the whole question. All right, I'm playing with my document cam. I was lucky to get it today. Thanks, Mr. Penson, for letting me in and let me grab this better document situation. Okay, moving on. So this is our required work. We're ready to figure out what the question is about, and we're just going to start by bracketing information that's not tied to a task. Innovative techniques are often employed by artists to challenge established art-making traditions and to express new ideas in new ways. All right, I know we're talking about innovation. Don't know what I'm being asked, but we'll find out. The work above utilizes an innovative technique. Select and fully identify another work of art that challenges established art-making conventions by engaging innovative techniques. You may choose a work from the list below or any other relevant work from later Europe and America. All right. We're not getting a task point for ID this year. So that gives me more information this year about what I can select. And it's highly likely that even though I wrote in from later Europe and America, it's highly likely they're going to say any other relevant work you want. Okay, so we will see how that goes. I'm not completely sure what that will look like, but at least you're looking at this aggressively by looking at specifically what area you could write about. This is content area 4, right? So anything after 1750, I think the first work in the image set is the portrait of Sor Juana Inés de la Cruz. So pretty much from the Enlightenment forward, right, until the year 1980. Okay. And then of course you could choose any other relevant work. Moving on. Here are the suggested works from that content area: The Maryland Diptych by Andy Warhol, or Woman One by Willem de Kooning. You have some innovative processes that are tied to those, so we can talk about those alongside Helen Frankenthaler. Now, if you were to go off list, right, you do so at your own peril, guys. But there may be some people who I didn't think about that you would really like to talk about, like Marcel Duchamp, right? You could talk about ready-mades. I'm not sure how strong that would be, simply because sometimes students have a hard time talking about ready-mades. You're talking about an innovative technique, and the ready-made was already made. However, you could make the argument, depending on how passionately committed you are to him, that his signature, his repositioning it, his submitting it as a finished piece, was making this, a claim on conceptual art, which was fairly innovative for its time. So I'll put a question mark there. You might do Yayoi Kusama, okay, who was basically a unconventional artist in that she borrowed from pop, painting, installation happenings. The image in our image set is Narcissus Garden. Some of you did a fantastic concept map on her. So that might be a situation where you could talk about challenging the male-dominated art-making world at the time. But so there are some off-list things. It just depends on whether or not you're comfortable with them. But I think you have enough to talk about by sticking with the list. All right, moving on. We're annotating, Mr. J. Describe the artist's use of the innovative technique. Well, the next thing we do is circle verbs, right? I got to describe, I got to explain. Here's a question. Why did these artists choose to engage techniques to challenge art-making traditions? Okay, if we're going to say, well, because, then we know that they're saying you need to explain something. So here, my explain is like suggested over here to the sideline, okay? Now we got to go back and take a look. I've only got like 3 chunks here, and I'm looking for way more points than that. So it's connector word time. Box those connectors. I've got and, right? Oh, both. Let's see. Okay. Similarity, difference. I'll come back to that between the two works. I think that affects the viewer's interpretation of the imagery. Okay. Why did the artist choose to engage techniques to challenge art making, use specific context from both? All right. This time it's even bolded, right? So it's big, big, big. All right. Need to focus on some like whys and hows. There's a big one right there. That's going to probably be contextual because why is what we, back it up with about history. One formal similarity between the two works that affects the viewer's interpretation of the imagery using. Okay. So I think that's all of my hows and whys and all of that stuff. Now we're going to underline key phrases, right? Describe the artist's use of the innovative technique that creates the imagery. So whatever technique that we use, we got to talk about how it makes the image we see. Okay. One formal similarity or difference. I guess I can highlight that box word, right? I get to choose whichever one I want between the two works that affects the viewer's interpretation. Okay. So when they see this, how is a viewer supposed to involve themselves with that imagery, right? Are they allowed to see something they recognize? Are they going to interpret it their own way? Is it going to be like a full novel of a story, or is it just going to be like a short story or a poem that just gives you like an impression of what the mood of the piece is? Okay, so just throwing that out there. The next thing, why did these artists choose to engage techniques? All right, now we told them basically how. Now they want to know why, right? What's going on in history? Right? How does this challenge what's going on in history? So, why did they choose to engage these techniques to challenge art making at the time? All right, so now we're ready to go back to and figure out what evidence, right? Describe the innovative technique that creates the imagery we see that's kind of implies visual, right? Visual evidence. You got to be able to see it to believe it. So I know this first part is with VE. I know it's got to do it for both. So we'll come back and label points in just a second. Explain one formal similarity or difference between the two works that affects using there it is with specific visual evidence, right? I got it there. All right, I got contextual evidence down here. Is that all my evidence? All right, so let's go back to the steps here. Describe technique. We see in both the work shown and in your selected work, T1, T2. Explain one formal similarity or difference between the two works that affects the viewer's interp. I'm going to say, okay, I think that is... Yeah, that's T3, right? Okay. Now, why did they want us to answer this question? Why did the artist choose to engage techniques to challenge art making traditions at this time? So we got to answer the question first. There's my T4. And then I have to use contextual evidence from both works in my response. So I'm going to answer the question and then I'm going to back it up. T5, T6. Okay. So let's block this sucker. Okay. I'm guessing you're going to have a T, like T1, T2. Okay. And you're going to do the magic of 3 for me. And that will definitely make sure that you get those first 2 points. Now, flipping back to my rubric, to my question. Explain one formal similarity or difference. This is where you guys get to choose. Here's the idea. Okay. Ooh, did you see that? Form. Right here, VE, it has to be about form. You can't just say subject matter. That's very, very specific, and I just caught it. See why this is so important? You definitely want to give yourself a chance to go back over these several times because you might miss a little bit of nuance there by skipping over that too quickly. This is going to be form, okay? And I could do a similarity or a difference, right? Doesn't matter which. You guys get to pick. So you would decide if you're looking probably at this and Maryland diptych. right, by Andy Warhol, probably going to go with a difference, right? You might be able to do some similarities with Willem de Kooning and that happy accident that he does with occasionally splotching and dripping on the image that he makes. This whole image was about, what the color would do for itself. So I don't think the artist really knew what the outcome was going to be. So that is up to you and what you choose. Moving on. Why did these artists choose to engage techniques to challenge art making traditions at this time in history? This is a triangle, okay? We've got an idea at the top. Now, are we having to compare this? Why did these artists, it sounds like this is supposed to be a similarity, right? Why did these artists choose to engage techniques to challenge art making traditions? So they both were doing it, right? So I'm going to say that this is probably, how did they do this? Why did they do this, right? Why did they both challenge tradition? Okay. And then if that's my T3, this is my T4. And split it down the middle for my T5 evidence from the required work and my T6 evidence from the work I selected. All right, so T1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now we're ready to write. Okay, so wow, this would be a rough scenario, right? This would be 3 works that were in the last thing that we covered. So that would be kind of like a worst case scenario, I think, for people who didn't get to finish the class. It's very, very important that Mr. J finishes all of these videos. I've got one for you for each one of these artists. And I think you would do a much better job with this kind of late work rather than just choosing something that would be earlier. So I even off-listed people I need to do videos for, right? So this just stresses to you that we really need to finish the instruction. And that's a reminder to Mr. J as much as it is to you, right? Because this is a relatively late work in the image set. Okay, so that should help you with that first option. I'll be back in a second with a few more, okay?